Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Vasudama Radha Vasudana Yamuna Tira Vanasrama Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Vasudana Brajadana Vasudana Yamuna Tira Vanasrama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Gaur Pimanandi, Jai Nishika Paramahamsa, Pri Radhika Sadhasto, Tarasatya, Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Hyderabad, Charanarvind, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Skandiviti, Founder Acharya, Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Translated for book distribution ki, Jai Shri Shri Ganesha ki, Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki, Jai Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Jai Shri Giri Govardhana ki, Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki, Jai Shri Shri Radha Kunda Bihari ki, Jai Nitai Gauru Primanandi, all bloodies to the assembled devotees, all bloodies to the assembled devotees, all bloodies to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Govinda, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Abhyanatmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Takshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhuktale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vande Ham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sahajadatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakam Vitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tariyasya Kripa Sindhu Devasya Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Ram Saiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Atho Jaya Mudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supreme human being, to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sridham, the author. Nasta prayesa badrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Pranam Brahmasamitam Uttama Sloka Saritam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Tamasamitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Sakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swastayanam Maha. The Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God as Sridham Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Vasudabhyaya Namaha. Om Vasudabhyaya Namaha. Om Vasudabhyaya Namaha. Kam karoti bhatanam tvangom langayate girim yatvipa tamaham vande Sri Gurum Dinataram. Yatvipa tamaham vande Sri Gurum Dinataram. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. And we are looking at, okay, 37. We jumped a few cantos here. We've been reading from the second canto. We jumped 5 cantos. We are in the 7th canto, chapter 15, entitled Instructions for Civilized Human Beings, and text number 37. You reading this section now, or?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
Continue. 37 and 36 today.
Today is 37 and?
38.
38. Well, 38 and 38 is combined with 39, yes. Actually. Okay. Yai Sva Deha Smrito Anatma. Atma and Anatma.
It's actually 38, 39.
It is 38, 39, right?
We did it actually yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
You sure, huh?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Actually, here also is. I
It's written
just, when I
33.
saw the translation, I found it.
Okay. We are jumping again. This time not too far. 38 and 39. Still in Canto 7, Chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings. Grihastasya Kriya Tyago Vrata Tyago Vatar Api Tapasving Tapasvino Grama Seva Vikshor Indriya Lolata Asrama Prasada He Ete Kalu Asrama Vidambanaha Deva Maya Vimudham Tan Upekshata Anukampaya Grihastasya Kriyatyago Vrata Tyago Vator Api Tapasvino Grama Seva Vikshor Indriyalolata Asrama Prasada Hete Kalvasrama Vidambanaha Devamaya Vimudham Stan Upekshita Nukampaya Grihastasya Kriyatyago Vrita Tyago Vatorapi Tapasvino Grama Seva Vikshora Indriya Lolata Asrama Pasada Hete Kalvasrama Vidambana Devamaya Vimudam Stan Upaksheta Nukampaya Grihastasya Kriyatyago Vrata Tyago Vatorapi Tapasvino Grama Seva Vikshorindriya Lolata Asrama Prasada Yete Alvasrama Vidambanaha Devamaya Vimudham Stan Upekshena Tukampaya Grihastasya Kriyatyago Vratatyago Vatorapi Tapasvino Grama Seva Vikshorindriya Lolata Asrama Pasada Yete Kalvasrama Vidambana Devamaya Vidudam Upekshata Nukampaya. Grihastasya, for a person
person
situated in householder life.
situated in household life,
Kriya Tyagaha,
Kriya
to give up the duty
to give up the duty
of a householder.
of a household,
Vrata Tyagaha,
Vrata Tyaga,
to give up vows
to give up vows
and austerity.
and austerity.
Mm. Vatoho, for a brahmachari.
For a brahmachari,
Api, also.
also
Tapasvinaha,
Tapasvina,
for a vanaprastha.
Varivanprastha,
One who has adopted
one who has adopted
a life of austerities.
the life of austerity,
Gramaseva, to live in a village
to live in a village
and serve the people therein.
and serve the people therein.
Vikshaho,
Vikshaho,
for a sannyasi
for a sannyasi
who lived by begging alms.
who lived by begging alms.
Indriya lolata,
Indriya,
addicted to sense enjoyment.
addicted to sense enjoyment.
Asrama,
Ashrama,
of the spiritual orders of life.
of the spiritual orders.
Apasaddaha,
Vasudama,
the most abominable.
the most abominable.
He,
He,
indeed,
indeed,
ete,
they,
all these.
all these,
Kalu,
color,
indeed.
indeed,
Asrama vidambanaha,
Ashrama, Vidambana,
imitating
imitating
and therefore cheating
and therefore cheating
the different spiritual orders.
the different spiritual orders.
Devamaya vimudhang,
They
who are bewildered
who are bewildered
by the external energy
by the external energy
of the Supreme Lord.
of the Supreme Lord.
Tan,
Then,
them,
then,
upekshata.
Upekshata,
One should reject
one should reject
and not accept
and not accept
as genuine.
as genuine.
Anukampaya, or by compassion,
By compassion,
teach them real life.
teach them real life.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sridham Prabhupada Ki.
Jai.
It is abominable for a person living in the Grihastha ashram to give up the regulative principles, for a brahmachari not to follow the brahmachari vows while living under the care of the Guru, for a vanaprastha to live in the village and engage in so-called social activities, or for a sannyasi to be addicted to sense gratification. One who acts in this way is to be considered the lowest renegade. Such a pretender is bewildered by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one should either reject him from any position or, taking compassion upon him, teach him, if possible, to resume his original position. Kindly repeat after me. It is abominable
It is abominable
for a person
for a person
living in the Grihastha ashram
living in the Grihastha
to give up
to give up
the regulative principles,
the regulative principles
for a brahmachari
for a brahmachari
not to follow
not to follow
the brahmachari vows
the brahmachari vows
while living
while living
under the care of the Guru,
under the care of the Guru,
for a vanaprastha
for a vanaprastha
to live in the village
to live in the village
and engage
and engage
in so-called social activities,
so-called social activities,
for a sannyasi
or for a sannyasi
to be addicted
to be addicted
to sense gratification.
to sense gratification.
One who acts in this way
One who acts in this way
is to be considered
is to be considered
the lowest renegade.
the lowest renegade.
Such a pretender
Such a pretender
is bewildered
is bewildered
by the energy,
by the external energy,
by the external energy
by the external energy
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
of the Supreme Personality.
and one should either reject him
And one should either reject him
from any position
from any position
or, taking compassion
or taking compassion
upon him,
on him,
teach him,
teach him
if possible,
possible
to resume
to resume
his original position.
his original position.
Purport. We have repeatedly stressed that human culture does not begin unless one takes to the principles of Varnasrama dharma. Although Grihastha life is a concession for the enjoyment of sex, one cannot enjoy sex without following the rules and regulations of householder life. Furthermore, as already instructed, a brahmachari must live under the care of the guru. Brahmachari gurukule vasanna danto gurur hitam. If a brahmachari does not live under the care of the guru, if a vanaprastha engages in ordinary activities, or if a sannyasi is greedy and eats meat, eggs, and all kinds of nonsense for the satisfaction of his tongue, he is a cheater and should immediately be rejected as unimportant. Such persons should be shown compassion, and if one has sufficient strength, one should teach them to stop them from following the wrong path in life. Otherwise, one should reject them and pay them no attention. So no one is being spared here in the purport. Living entity.
Yeah.
Attending Bhagavatam class. Eh? Okay. So the Bhagavatam is quite direct in reminding us what is, as Prabhupada refers to here, human culture. Human culture, very first line that Prabhupada writes in the purport, begins with Varnasrama dharma. That is the beginning, not the end, the beginning of human life, of culture. Varna and asrama. So here the emphasis is especially given on asrama. Whole Vedic culture is based on ashram. Every member of the society is meant to belong to a particular ashram. And that's why Varnasrama is important. Unless we know that we are belonging and therefore meant to follow the prescribed rules and regulations within the ashram, then we will miss the point. We will not be considered civilized according to Vedic culture. Again, as Prabhupada very clearly, and not only in this purport, in so many places, has very strongly, emphatically explained how what differentiates animal life from human life is religion. Religion means religion in the sense of dharma, in the sense of understanding that God exists and that we are meant for a higher purpose. We are meant for a divine purpose because we are by nature divine. Aham Brahmasmi, we are spirit in nature. Mamai Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. We are the eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. But Mana Shastrani Indriyani Prakriti Stani Karshati, due to our close association with the mind and the senses, due to allowing ourselves to be controlled by the mind and the senses. Therefore, prakriti stani karshati, the hard struggle for existence. We are struggling very hard. So, so culture begins when we prepare ourselves. That's why early life, brahmachari life, is meant to prepare oneself to enter some particular ashram, either brahmachari ashram, grihastha, banapasta, and sannyas. So, ashram means the focus is on spiritual life. The focus is on developing, expanding our spiritual awareness or spiritual consciousness, or we say Krishna consciousness, because until one comes to that level, one is still incomplete or imperfect in one's understanding. So those specifics are mentioned here, that the brahmachari, what are especially the duties of a brahmachari. Brahmachari life means to actually live with the guru and follow the instructions of the guru, brahmachari. Prabhupada quotes a verse in the beginning of the 11th chapter of this canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Narada Muni begins to give his instructions. Very totally lost concept in modern day society. Vedic culture is very ideal in that one who is fortunate to receive this type of Gurukula training, then he will become an ideal person, regardless of which ashram he follows. Actually, without proper training, one will not be successful in the grihastha ashram. And of course, if one is not successful as a Gurukul, within the Gurukula system, then the rest of one's life actually becomes spoiled. So everything begins actually with early training in Gurukula. So Gurukul life actually is meant to be a very, although there is tapasya, brahmacharyena samena cha, but brahmachari life, I remember sometimes I remember meeting some of my godbrothers who are grihasthas, and they tell me, Maharaj, my best days were brahmachari life. What did I do? I should have remained brahmachari. It's too late now. But and so therefore Vedic culture encourages that one who is able to remain brahmachari. That is not the same instruction for Matajis. Matajis are not encouraged to remain celibate. Celibacy is primarily for brahmacharis, because brahmachari can in this way fully dedicate his life to practicing Krishna consciousness and to spreading also Krishna consciousness. It is more easy for a young man or for a single man to travel and to preach and spread Krishna consciousness than it is for Mataji. Matajis are not meant for that, not meant to travel alone, for example. So Vedic culture, therefore, purposely, intentionally makes a very clear-cut distinction between boys and girls, between men and women, and clearly outlines what are the duties and responsibilities for each one of them. Not what we see happening in modern day society now. It's like unisex, you know. They have these, I think, where people get the barber shop, they call it, where they get salon and whatnot. It's all completely deviation, total mental speculation, and which winds up or ends up in all kinds of abominable. The word abominable, I think, is used here also. Abominable means very bad, very very destructive individually and to society as well. So Prabhupada often would explain, dharma means law. Dharma means following principles. We say the laws of nature, the laws of nature, the laws of the country, the laws of God. So dharma, that is a very important aspect of dharma, this Varnasrama dharma. So brahmachari culture, therefore, when it is not followed, it makes for a horrible situation in society, which we are seeing on a daily basis in modern day society. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada was very anxious to re-establish Gurukul system. Varnasrama cannot be cannot become a reality unless we re-establish Gurukula. And I think quite recently, I think someone was sending some statistics that India used to have over 7 lakhs Gurukula, which is quite amazing actually, but understandable because practically speaking, it means within every village there is Gurukula. And of course, Gurukula was especially meant to train leaders. The world is suffering today because of absence of leaders. I remember maybe 20 years ago when I was in Malaysia, there was a big heading in the newspaper, and it was, wanted leaders, something, indicating that due to not having qualified leaders in society, leaders means who are able to lead a country or to lead a village. So leadership is a very important aspect of the Vedic culture, and Gurukul is especially meant to train individuals to become leaders, isn't it? Yeah. And that is all nicely explained in our shastra. So not only are brahmacharis meant to follow rules and regulations, but also grihastas. The point is being made here. One who is a grihasta and simply engages in activities of sense gratification is also, Prabhupada I think uses the word nonsense. The nonsense. So many nonsense people. The whole world is full of nonsense individuals because of not knowing about, not having been trained. And that's why this is so important actually for our householders, either those who are presently householders or those who will one day become householders. That I think within our ISKCON society, we're not sufficiently training individuals to enter householder life. I know coming from a Christian background, I remember going to the church, and they would actually have in public, they would have some announcement or notice that such and such is engaged, and they're going to be married in 1 year from now. It was known beforehand, and there was like some counseling or preparation for individuals to enter householder life, because life in general is difficult enough. It is hard enough to deal with one mind, what to speak of 2, 3, or 4. You have to deal with 4 minds now. Your mind and then 3 other minds. So householder life, Prabhupada had great expectations actually for ISKCON as a society to become successful, unless we are able to show, to demonstrate, to have ideal householders, then we will not have good progeny. Householder is meant to beget children, to beget Krishna conscious children, devotees. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada stressed this point very much, that our householders, they should be therefore understanding the regulations that are there. They should know that they are entering householder life only for a certain period of time, and for the primary purpose, actually, of course, helping one another to advance and progress in Krishna consciousness, and especially to give opportunity to some fortunate living entity to be born in that atmosphere, in a Krishna conscious family. Prabhupada used to explain how his Guru Maharaj was a very special, naturally, of course, personality, because he was born in a Vaishnava family. So to be born in a Vaishnava family is something very rare. And therefore, again, Varnasrama system cannot be properly established unless we have such type of trained individuals to enter householder life, so that they can beget Krishna conscious children. So brahmachari life needs to be followed based on guidelines in the Shastra. Householder life also, it is it is not a free license for sense gratification, but it is the word regulated. Householder life means regulated life. And therefore Shastra speaks about Grihamedi life, which is unregulated. Grihamedi and Grihastha. Yeah. Griha, house. And then of course, if we don't have ideal brahmacharis, we will not have ideal grihasthas. If we don't have ideal grihasthas, we will not have ideal vanaprasthas. And if we don't have ideal vanaprastha, we'll never have sannyasis, ideal sannyasis. So even sannyasis here, of course, Prabhupada mentions about eating meat, and then, what is it? He mentions about if a sannyasi is greedy and eats meat and eggs and all kinds of nonsense, then of course, what to speak of other activities. If one in any of the ashram breaks the 4 basic principles of human life, in terms of what the Bhagavatam describes as the four pillars of dharma. So again, dharma. If we lose focus on dharma, then the principles are no longer. It's no longer possible to follow actually these principles. We can only follow these principles properly. The principles of no meat eating, no illicit sex life, no gambling, no intoxication. If we are serious about developing these four basic qualities of dharma, the pillars of dharma, found in the Bhagavatam, again at the beginning of this presentation by Narada Muni, Satyam Daya Tapasocham, truthfulness, compassion, austerity, and cleanliness. That's why we have to check. Check means analyze or test where we are in terms of these principles. How honest, truthful are we with ourselves, with others? How much we are developing this sentiment or this feeling of compassion, feeling for the welfare of others. Unless one has this feeling of compassion, he will have no inclination, no desire to preach. Isn't it? We are primarily, as Vaishnavas, as followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a preaching movement because we are. That is the form meant to be. That is meant to be the foremost qualification or quality of the Vaishnava, his compassion. And austerity, naturally, unless we are regulated, beginning with a morning program and chanting our rounds, all of these basic regulations that are there, then we cannot be ideal in whichever ashram we belong to. So this verse once again is covering all the members of the Varnasrama system, and I'll just read it again here. It is abominable for a person living in the Grihastha ashram to give up the regulative principles, for a brahmachari not to follow the brahmachari vows while living under the care of the Guru, or a vanaprastha to live in the village and engage in so-called social activities, or for a sannyasi to be addicted to sense gratification. One who acts in this way is to be considered the lowest renegade. Such a pretender. What is renegade? The word renegade means someone who doesn't follow, who goes away. Renegade. To give up. Yeah. Such a pretender is bewildered by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one should either reject him from any position, or taking compassion upon him, teach him, if possible, to resume his original position. Yeah. So, Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu asked his first question a few days ago. It was good. He asked a question 2 days back. So, brahmacharis, not only brahmacharis, but brahmacharis, especially students, are meant to be inquisitive. So, any questions on this verse or comments?
Guru Maharaj, because Prabhupada, like in each canto, like Prabhupada emphasized on about the civilized human beings.
Civilized human beings, yes.
Yeah. So because like it is like very clear that without the the proper order of the four orders, four spiritual orders.
Yes.
So we cannot be a civilized.
Correct.
So like of course ours is a preaching movement. Like when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was there at the time, is it a movement that it is actually Prabhupada wanted that needs to be spreaded over, and then later Prabhupada wanted these village communities to be developed, or like what was there actually? Like,
the question is whether Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur just wanted that there be a preaching movement. Your question is how is the importance of village life come in, or how to balance preaching and village life?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Kind of, yeah.
So where like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where Prabhupada, he was like fully focused on to spread about the
teaching
holy name and the what the the movement, the
right.
Kali Yuga movement.
Right.
So where Prabhupada now the second phase, Prabhupada is bringing up about the civilized human beings and practice Varnasrama especially. So it is like easier for us to practice our spiritual thing.
Right.
Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, like he took some time, or like how he managed to. He also commented somewhere about Varnasrama. In his literatures or in his commentaries, any commentaries.
I would say that compared to Srila Prabhupada, there's less emphasis or less references that I've come across. At the same time, there are specific. Ask him to get my cell phone. My cell phone. There are very clear instructions coming actually from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Yes.
Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, lived like up to 100 years ago. He passed away 100 years, a bit more than 100 years, 1914 actually. 1914, now we are 2022. And we have to try and see things in their context. What Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was doing was like that's why he is referred to as a pioneer of spreading Krishna consciousness, especially in the Western world. And he was a pioneer in reintroducing the movement of Lord Chaitanya, which, as we know, had been practically lost. And I would say, I've heard this as well, that one of the reasons that the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became lost to Sahajism, especially, for such a long period of time, 300 years, was that at some point there was, we allowed this kind of imbalance to take place between spreading the holy name and also living and dealing with the material world and the material energy and following what is meant to be the ideal lifestyle that will facilitate that development of self-realization. Yeah. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote extensively, as we know, and he gave specific instructions. He personally, of course, we're talking about, this is like he began preaching Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he began preaching in the 19th century, 1880s, 1890s, and at that time, a vast majority of people were still in villages here in India. Although industrialization had started, it was still in its early beginning. So in one sense, and that was also true, although things were changing for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he began preaching especially after taking sannyas, isn't it? Yeah. But it was part of a grand scheme, which was specified by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I'll just read a quote here if I can find it quickly here, whereby he instructed his son, Bimal Prasad, even before he took sannyas, he instructed him on the subject matter of Varnasrama in a very, I would say, a clear manner. And okay, there's a few quotes here. And okay. In addition to some general instructions given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur on Varnasrama in the following books, for example, Sajjana Toshani, as well as the Sri Chaitanya Siksamriya. He gave specific instructions, I don't have them at hand here, to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that part of his mission was to reintroduce Varnasrama. Of course, in a very similar way that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a pioneer, the movement started by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also a pioneer movement, reintroducing Vaishnava sannyas, and so introducing the sannyas ashram and establishing temples, the Gaudiya Mat, 64 mats. So the main emphasis was on introducing the holy name, and but at the same time, because he had been given that order, there are some references regarding Varnasrama, but those have been especially highlighted, I would say, by our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada I would say, bringing these two aspects, practically giving them equal footage, in the sense that Prabhupada made statements that unless one introduces Varnasrama, one cannot so easily become a Vaishnava. Although there are quotes and there are statements by Prabhupada mentioning that actually if when I went to America, if I would have introduced Varnasrama at that time, it would not have worked. He explains like that. I didn't give much emphasis to all of these different regulations or to Varnasrama. Prabhupada clearly explains like that. So we need to understand, again, things in their proper context, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur preached, and his mood and mentality and the situation, social situation at that time. Same with Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then same with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada first went to the West, his mood also was simply to find brahmanas. Prabhupada would say, I'm going around to different places to just bring up, to catch people who are able, because the the standard that Prabhupada gave was like Brahminical standard, chanting 16 rounds. I mean, Prabhupada made a concession. We're supposed to be chanting 64 rounds. Prabhupada made a concession because he was preaching in the Western countries. Of course, I mean, we know the famous quote from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Translate something. Famous quote whereby Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, explained that if one is not chanting 64 rounds, he's not a human being. He's not considered a human being. So similar to the statement here that if one is not following asrama, then he's not considered a civilized person, not cultured person. So looking at the various instructions, both in the Bhagavatam and of course in lectures and conversations given by Srila Prabhupada, we should understand, at least that is my clear understanding, that these two aspects of dharma, the spiritual aspect in terms of taking up to the chanting, to the practice of devotional service, and to the preaching, needs to go hand in hand simultaneously with reestablishing the social order as described as per the Vedic culture of Varna and Asrama. And that to me is absolutely clear. and I cannot understand how some individuals make statements that Varnashram is, not important, and Varnashram is not for Kali Yuga, and etc. etc.
Here, when I'm reading this, the whole 7th Canto,
right?
Till up to now, we have come to 15th chapter, where Narada Muni is explaining the importance of the Brahmana. Actually,
yes.
So, like clearly, Prabhupada he was like, he was shooting up.
Right. Yeah. Correct.
It was like very clear. It was like opening up like many things.
Yes.
That how Prabhupada wanted this. He's showing up the proper social order system.
Yes. Yes. So I mean, on so many occasions, in so many places, Prabhupada makes this point that one of our objectives, one of the purposes of the Krishna consciousness movement is to, one very famous quote is to bring a complete overhaul in society and to come back, to reestablish the system of Varna and Asrama. Specifically, it's a direct quote, and there are many such references as well. So the thing is, it's not at all an easy thing to do. It's much easier to it's easier to be a what is it? There's two classes of Vaishnavas, Bhajananandi and Gosyanandi. So in one sense, it's easier to be a Bhajananandi. You just forget about everything and you go and just chant Hare Krishna and like that. Of course, that is clearly not recommended in our Vaishnav line. It was rejected by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And of course, but the problem is that we understand Bhajan, Gosyanandi by simply preaching. Of course, simply preaching is not to be underestimated. It's most important. But we can also and should not also neglect. We can't just be preaching while neglecting this other dimension or aspect, because the majority, yes, Prabhupada in the very beginning and throughout actually mentions how it is so important to revive Brahminical culture. But Prabhupada clearly explained Brahminical culture is not simply only limited to Brahmanas, isn't it? Brahminical culture includes the other sections of society, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And therefore, our objective is to do these two things, because majority of people are not meant to be Brahmanas. Of course, some devotees will say it's not so important to be Brahmana. You become Vaishnava automatically. Become Vaishnava. Which is true. If you actually become Vaishnava, automatically you're Brahmana, because you develop the Brahminical qualities. But there are duties and responsibilities that are different of a Brahmana, of a Kshatriya, of a Vaishya, and a Shudra. For the whole of society to function properly, we need these different divisions. And of course, the ideal, and this is what Prabhupada meant by promoting Daiva Varnasrama, is that these 4 different duties and responsibilities in terms of Varna are taken up by Vaishnavas. And then there will be much less of the clash and differences among them, because they will be situated on a very high level of self-realization. They will be highly Krishna conscious, isn't it? So therefore, when you have a very elevated Krishna conscious Kshatriya or leader, or someone who is a Vaishya, or for that matter Shudra as well, Shudras are also meant to be elevated in consciousness by proper association of these 3 natural leaders within society. Yeah, correct. Because Shudra is meant to basically serve under their guidance, under their direction. But none of this actually can really mean anything or can become a reality unless we come back to such a very basic aspect of the Vedic culture, which is lifestyle. And we are not understanding this to a large extent within our own ISKCON society, that the actual lifestyle, Vedic culture is promoting a particular way of living. Vedic culture is based on, in our Varnasrama college, that's why Prabhupada emphasized Varnasrama college, to learn, okay, what are the Vedic standards in terms of economics, isn't it? Yeah, the Vedic economy is based on the Krishi Guraksha Vanijam, isn't it? And the whole, it's not only the Vaishyas who are meant to care for cows and be connected with the land. All the members of the Vedic culture are dependent on this system of agriculture and cow care, isn't it? Yeah. So, the point I want to make is that unless, and of course, means unless we accept this very important instruction given by Srila Prabhupada, that we are a society meant not to depend on this misdirected modern civilization. We are a society that is meant to live actually off the land. We are a society, because Vedic culture is promoting, this is meant to be the standard, human standard. Of course, modern society has gone so far away from that, and bringing everyone into this modern day industrialized and mechanized system way of life, where computers computers play such a major part in everyone's life, and people are trained for these. They call it STEM education, right? Science and technology, science, technology, electricity, uh, uh, and mathematics. So very materialistically oriented. That's what happens when we don't follow religion. We're on the bodily platform, and we just try to improve our bodily comforts and material comforts, etc., like that. So that's why these particular chapters are so important, and especially important for grihasthas, but not only for grihasthas, for all the members. Like this verse today is dealing with all of the ashrams, and there's, we are just like Prabhupada would say, if we're not Krishna conscious, we're missing the point. We're missing the central point, which is Krishna. And if we're not sufficiently Krishna conscious, we're also missing this point about Varnasrama.
Yes.
Although we can't relate to it, we can't relate to it. And the majority of our devotees are not able to relate to it because modern day society has already put us in this most, different lifestyle, and it's much easier. I mean, many devotees, including many leaders, understand that actually, of course, this is most important, but bring the argument that how to convince our devotees. We can't convince our devotees unless we ourselves become convinced.
That should be within in our change.
Yeah, unless we ourselves become convinced and live according to that philosophy also. So we have this kind of dilemma that we're a preaching movement, meant especially to spread the holy name and through book distribution, etc., and establishing temples. But we're not only a preaching movement, or we could say in another way that part of the preaching movement is also to preach this lifestyle, to preach and demonstrate how individuals are meant to live within the Vedic culture, how communities are meant to, what actual ideal communities are meant to be. We can have communities in our cities. We do have a few examples where devotees have purchased houses around temples and they have a community and whatnot, but that is not the ideal. I mean, in terms of the overall picture, because tomorrow the whole economy collapses. What are you going to do around your temple? You're going to leave that temple. You're going to bring your deities outside of your temple, because it's like it's happening in Ukraine, for example. We have not properly, not sufficiently understood this aspect, and therefore there is confusion, and we are not we're not as effective as we can.
Prabhupada has presented that everything is there in my books.
Yes. But that is one of the big problems, is that not sufficient.
To make a proper social system, everything is there in my books.
Yes.
ISKCON can give the solution for the other people.
Yes.
Can make ideal society.
Yes. But unless we follow what's in our books, then, yeah. Okay. We should also follow the time. Jai Granth